In this video, I'll be showing you step by step how I created this stylish handkerchief skirt with a twist. For the materials, I'm making use of a cotton plaid fabric. I used 3 yards for the making of this skirt and it is one step. So if you want to make yours in a 2 step, then you need about 6 yards or 5 yards. Then I have elastic band of 2 inches wide. Then I'm cutting directly on my fabric, so I need my tailor's chalk and fabric scissors. So these are the measurements you need to take when making this skirt. You need your skirt length measurements, okay? You also need your round hip measurements if you're adding elastic, and then you need your actual round waist measurements. So ensure you measure your exact skirt length, okay? Your round hip measurement and your actual round waist measurements. I'm working with a fabric length of 60 inches. So first I'll align the edges properly, and then I'll fold the fabric in half, making sure that the both edges are together. After that, I'll fold it again in the other direction to make it 4 layers, just like you're folding your fabric to cut a regular peplum. At this point, you notice that one side is on fold while the other side has 2 folded edges, and that's exactly what we need before shaping the skirts. So for cutting the skirts, we need the hip measurements first because we're adding elastic to the band to the waistline. So we need the waist to be very wide. So to get the exact radius to cut the peplum, we're going to divide your round hip measurements by 6.28, which is a formula to cut a 360-degree peplum. So after dividing my round hip measurement by 6.28, I got approximately 7.2. Then to get the exact length you need for your fold, you're going to add your length of your skirt to it. So I added the length of the skirt to the radius and I got 29.2. So I measured the 29 inches on both sides of the length to ensure that it is accurate before I go ahead to cut my skirts. So having done that, next thing I'm going to do now is to get the circumference of the peplum. So I have 7.2 after calculating. So 7.2, just count the 2 lines after 7. So from the sharp point, I measured 7.2 to form a circle this way. Ensure you're taking your measurements on the part that is folded, the part that has folded edges. Okay, so after marking all the points, I'm going to connect them together like this to form an arc. Then for the length of the skirt, you are going to take out your band length of 2 inches and then measure the full length of the skirt. So for the full length of the skirt, I have 22 inches. Then I'm going to add my folding allowance. I want the allowance to be 1.5 inches, or you can do 1 inch. So take out 2 inches for your band and then measure your skirt length plus folding allowance together if you want to fold it or weave it, depending on what you like. Then after doing that, I place my straight ruler on that skirt length to draw a straight line to the other edge. Then I did the same thing on the other side. I came out by 2 inches for my band before measuring my skirt length of 22 inches, and I added 1 inch for my folding allowance. So this other part is a little bit shorter with half an inch, so I had to reduce my folding allowance to 1 inch. And I'll also do the same thing for this other side. Now, if you wanted the skirt to be longer, you can add fabric to the edges to sew to complete your length, but I don't want to go through that stress, so I decided to correct that on the other side so that the both lengths will be equal. Do you understand? So this is how you draft the handkerchief skirt. Now I'll go ahead to cut my skirt length, and then after cutting the skirt length, I will go ahead to cut out the waist opening. Then on this other side that the length was not very long, I'm just going ahead to trim off the edges so that it will be even. So this is what the handkerchief skirt looks like after cutting. Next, I'll be showing you how to sew everything up together and how to fix your pocket in case you want to fix a pocket to it. So I folded it back again because I want to add pockets to my skirt. I need to cut out the edges. I want the sides to be open. So the 2 folded edges, I went ahead to cut it open like this so that I will be able to add pockets to the sides and then join the sides properly. If you don't want to add pockets, you want it to just be like a normal skirt, then you don't need to cut the sides open like I did. Now for the wrap tile detail that gives that tied around the waist effect, I folded my fabric into two, and for the width I measured 5.5 inches on fold. so that after sewing it comes out to be about 4 to 5 inches. And then for the length, I initially started with 50 inches, but it turned out to be too long after sewing, so I adjusted it to about 30 to 35 inches. So you can make yours around 30 to 40 inches depending on how long you want it to hang. So I cut two pieces of it for both sides of the skirt. Now I'll keep it aside and I'm going to cut the pockets. I folded my fabric into four, then I wrote a straight line as my starting line. Then I measured 8.5 inches for the length of the pocket and then 7.5 inches for the width, including allowance. After marking it, I joined the lines together and I curved the bottom edge before cutting it out. I also went ahead to cut it into four pieces, so two for each side of the skirt. So this is what the pocket looks like. Now the pockets are ready, so let's move on to sewing. So I brought back my skirt pieces and I indicated the wrong sides of the fabric so that I don't get confused when I'm sewing. Then I'll start by fixing my pocket. I came down by 1 inch from the waist. Then I'm going to be stitching two pieces of the pocket facing to the side part. So I place them front side facing front side like this. Then I'm just going to stitch it down with 1/2 inch. So I'm going to do the same process for the other side. So after sewing the wrong sides of this long rope, I turn it over to the good sides and iron, and this is what it looks like. So this was the point where I reduced the length from 50 inches to 35 inches. So I reduced the length for the two rope. Then after doing that, I'm going to fix it to the side of the skirt. So guys, like I said before, I'm supposed to fix my pockets on the side parts, but I decided to fix the rope first on one part of the skirt. So I'm just going to make this part the front of the skirt. So I place the rope in between the pocket facing and the side of the skirt. And I'm just going to stitch everything together using 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I repeated the same process on the other side. I placed the long rope first, then I placed my pocket facing on top of it to cover it up. So having done that, I'll take it to my sewing machine now and stitch the both sides. So guys, having done that, this is what it looks like. I went ahead to stitch and then I ironed it to make it relax. Next thing I'm going to do now is to bring the other part, which is going to be the back of the skirt, and join the sides. So I'm going to stitch with 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can also use 1 inch, but when stitching the pocket facing, ensure that you use 1/2 inch seam allowance so your pocket is not too small. So I'm just going to stitch from the top all the way to the pocket facing, around the pocket facing, and then stitch to the end of the skirts. I'll do this for both sides of the skirts. So after sewing the skirt, I turned it over to the front and ironed it properly. Next thing I want to do is to fix the band on the waist. So I measured what I have on the waist opening from one end to the other end, and whatever you have, you're going to times it by 2. Or you can just go ahead to measure around the waist, open it up and measure around it to get your exact waist measurements. So I'm going to keep my skirt aside and let me show you how to cut the band. So I've already gone ahead to cut out my band. I made the wideness 5.5 inches. On fold is going to be about 2.5, which is wide enough for my elastic band with sewing allowance. Then for the length, I made it 48 inches. I measured 47 around my waist. Then I added 1 inch for sewing allowance. While for the elastic band, you're going to measure your exact round waist, or you can even go ahead to reduce it because the elastic stretches. So whatever your round waist is, you can remove like 1 inch or 2 inch to make it tighter. So in this case, I went ahead to use my exact round waist measurements. Okay, I didn't add any sewing allowance at all, and this is because I later added drawstring to it. So if you don't want to add any drawstring, you just want only the elastic, you can go ahead to reduce your waist, reduce the inches of the elastic by 1 inch or 2 inches. So I folded my band fabric into two and I'm going to stitch it with half an inch, and I'm also going to stitch the elastic into two. So after sewing, the next thing I did was to fold the fabric in half and iron properly. So to attach the elastic, I matched the seam of the elastic with the seam of the fabric on the waistband. Then I placed the elastic inside the folded edge. I'll take it to my sewing machine and stitch on the elastic starting from the folded line. Then while sewing, I'll gently stretch the elastic to accommodate the fabric until I sew to the other end. So just watch closely and see exactly how I do it. So guys, after top stitching the elastic to the band fabric, I'm going to be joining the excess allowance on the edge so that I'll know the exact allowance I will be joining to my skirt waist. So now having done that, you can choose to match more lines on the band to make it look stylish, and also if you want to add drawstring to it. So this is what the waistband looks like. If you want a drawstring, just make small holes at the center and pass your rope through. So after fixing the band and fixing the drawstring to the band, next thing I want to do now is to fix the band to my waist opening. So how do we fix this small band to this wide waist? So first of all, we are going to notch the midpoint of the front and the midpoint of the back, just like I did. Now I'm going to take note of the midpoint of the band as well, the front and the back. After noting the midpoints, I'm going to place my band, my waistband, front side facing front side. I will make sure that the both midpoints of the band and the main fabric are equal. Do you understand? So I place the notched points of the band to the notched front as well. Then I also place the notched part of the band to the back. So you're going to place your band front side facing front side of your main fabric, and then just go ahead to use your pins to secure it. Then after doing that, I'll take it to my sewing machine and stitch. So while stitching, I'm going to stretch my band and stitch around the waist opening. So this is what I mean. You're going to stretch your band this way so that it's going to accommodate your waist. Now, if you stitch to the end and there is still a little bit of excess, you can pleat your fabric around the band so everything enters very well. So guys, this is what it looks like after stitching the waistband around the skirt opening. So what I need to do now is to weave the rough edges so that it will be neat. And then for the bottom, all you need to do is fold it into two because it's a straight piece. It's very easy to fold, or you can choose to weave it. Okay, you can choose to weave it like industrial weaving and you're good to go. I hope you find this tutorial helpful. Please like and follow for more.